Hello everyone, what's up? In tonight's video I'm gonna show you how I built, painted and weathered this 1/35th scale German Kugelpanzer from das Werk from start to finish. I came across his German Kugelpanzer kit by coincidence in January, and as soon as I laid eyes on it I knew that I had to have it. I wanted to get some more experience with scale models, but I also wanted to do something unique. This fit the bill perfectly. I immediately liked the box art, which looks pretty cool, but the manual I thought was really special. The pages are made to look weathered and even simulate coffee stains. Very cool in my books. I also loved the addition of 4 alternative paint schemes from 3 different nations: Germany, the Soviet Union and Japan. Since very little is known about this rather weird Kugelpanzer, which looks like a what-if or sci-fi vehicle, this seemed quite fitting. This also gave me the idea of painting one of the Kugelpanzer in a what-if 1947 scheme, and the other one as if it actually were a Warhammer 30k vehicle, rather than a historical one. If you're interested in what I did with this even more exotic second one, I will show some pictures at the end. That will be covered by a separate video only for Patreon supporters. But I digress. Did I mention 2 Kugelpanzer? Yeah, that's right. This comes with 2 of these contraptions, not just one. So this is me putting the second one together with my trusty Tamiya extra thin cement and my lacking model building skills. Since this isn't exactly groundbreaking content, I will speed things up a little bit. That sort of tow hook was a bit problematic for a big klutz like me, and I will confess that it came off 3 times during the project. But it is properly glued now. As you can see, playing with these can be a lot of fun. Of course, with all the excitement, I realized that I'd forgotten to glue that sort of handle on, so I quickly rectified that, and then I set about trying to minimize the pronounced gaps between both halves of the tracks, for which I used some plastic putty. Same as with the Star Wars models that I've painted recently, I opted for Tamiya XF paints with lacquer thinner instead of using a primer for my undercoat. For this I mixed flat black and whole red in equal parts and then diluted this mix roughly 50% with lacquer thinner. The reason I use lacquer thinner with these is twofold. Firstly, it massively improves sprayability, so to speak, so the paint dries instantly, there's no dry tip whatsoever, no spider webbing, and it's very easy to build nice thin coats. Secondly, with the addition of the lacquer thinner, the paint has a lot of bite, in fact a lot more than any acrylic primer. As you can see, I first spray a very thin mist over an entire area and then move on to the next, and so on and so forth, building up an even coat gradually over the entire model. This creates a much more even finish and further improves paint adhesion. I let the model dry for just 20 minutes before the next step, another benefit of the lacquer thinner. If you've seen some of my other videos, you will know that I don't often use chipping fluid. On this particular occasion, however, I wanted to change things up. There is not much mystery to its application, so I'll make this short. I gave it 2 coats and let it dry for like 20 minutes. For the first time in a while, I decided to go for water-based acrylics here. For the other Kugelpanzer, in fact, the red science fiction one, I went for Tamiya LP lacquers. If you're interested in seeing how that went, check out my Patreon, but I digress. I added a few drops of ammo acrylic thinner, which I highly recommend, and I set about applying as even a coat as I could. Again, I always try to build up my paint coats gradually. Once I was satisfied with Basecoat, I applied some highlights with a lighter version of the same color. These color modulation paint sets from Ammo are really convenient in this regard. After letting the paint dry for another 20 minutes, it was time for the real fun, chipping. Since I knew that there would be more layers of paint coming and more layers of chipping as well, I was quite happy to forego any restraint and go kind of crazy here. As you can see, I use the other end of my brush to create some scratches. So, in order to preserve all the work that I had done until now, I went for a nice coat of Tamiya Flat Clear, which again, when combined with lacquer thinner, is beautiful to spray and creates a really tough finish. So on to step 6, and what's this? Chipping fluid again? Yep, that's right, because we're hardly done at this stage. What I have called the first top coat here represents the tank being captured and repainted by the Soviet Army sometime in 1947. Like I said before, I imagined the tank in a what-if setting. Makes sense for such an absurd contraption, I think. Again, I'm using an acrylic by Ammo of MIG with a little bit of their thinner. I tried to leave the biggest chips semi-visible so as to help me find them for the next round of chipping. And speaking of chipping, here I am again abusing this little model. I have to say I really enjoyed this, and I quite like the combination of colors that was beginning to emerge out of this chaos. After letting the model dry for a bit, I applied chipping fluid one last time, trying to be a little bit more conservative in some areas this time. At this stage I was quite excited about what the tank might look like with yet another coat of paint on top. And now it was time to experiment and change things up again. I went for Tamiya Field Grey, which I quite like, but in order to be able to use chipping fluid, I chose AK Interactive's High Compatibility Thinner instead of the Tamiya Lacquer Thinner. I have used the AK one countless times before with the real colors range, and I knew that it not only works fine with chipping fluid, but that it actually reacts with it in a more controlled fashion, I would say, than water-based acrylics do. So anyway, I thinned the paint about 50% as I normally do, and I set about creating a thin, even coat of this dark green over the entire model. And by the way, yes, you can see that it is in fact green, not gray. What's this, chipping again, I hear you ask? Yes, but this is the last time, I promise. What I wanted to depict with this was that the tank had been captured and hastily repainted on the field, and probably more than once. In some places you can see the two different greens. In others you can see the German Dunkelgelb, and in a chosen few you can even see the red primer underneath. The results were quite striking, and so I was quite happy with this. In order to make my life easier both with the decals and with the pin wash that would follow, I decided to apply a nice coat of Tamiya Clear with lacquer thinner. This is very easy to spray and greatly enhances capillary action. So, for the decals, I use my favorite decal solution, Tamiya Mark Fit Strong, which I urge you to try if you think that stuff like Microsol is the best that you can get. Not only is this much, stronger, but it is a single product that works both to fix and to set the decals. I have tried many different brands, and nothing gets close to this. And did I mention that there is also a super strong one, if you like? The way I use this is very simple. I apply a little bit of the solution with its applicator brush, another plus by the way, to the intended surface and let it dry for at least 15 minutes. Then I apply the decal and reposition it as needed. I always check that the placement is correct before it's too late. This stuff sets very quickly. After about 5 minutes, I will coat the decals again with the solution and let it dry this time for just 2 or 3 minutes. When this is done, I take a cotton bud and roll it over the surface. You may have to repeat this last step if the decal is very thick or if the surface is particularly difficult. After the decals were firmly in place, which just required a few more minutes of drying time, I applied a bit of chipping with a sponge to make them fit a little bit better with the rest of the vehicle. The next step was something which is always crucial, the pin wash. Given the shape of the model, there were just two elements to wash. First of all the tracks, and then the details on the central part of the vehicle, like rivets or hinges. I used track wash for all of that, slightly diluted with thinner. This was easy and fun, and made quite a big difference. I had never painted a green vehicle actually, and it turns out that this track wash really works nicely with green colors. Of all the weathering products, I think Pigments are my current favorites. First I sort of sprinkled some onto the tracks. This was quite easy to do, but not without its risks. Whoops. But I continued unperturbed, knowing that I would be able to remove the excess pigment. After that it was time for some stippling and to fix any mistakes. See? Gone. The wash was not completely dry at this stage, so I decided not to apply any fixer and to just let the enamel do the work for me. After the earth pigments were applied, I was much happier with the finish, but I knew that I still needed some final touches. To this effect, I first applied a rust pigments to some of the larger chips, showing the undercoat. I applied this dry, and I blended them with a soft makeup brush to make the effect a little bit more subtle. After that, it was time for some graphite. Of all my weathering tools, I think the graphite pencils are surely the best value for money. Unlike with gunmetal pigments, which are quite fiddly and imprecise in application I find, this pure graphite pencil allows me to easily rub it against the surface that I want to metallize, so to speak, and to do so in a very controlled manner. As you can see, it is as striking as it is easy to do. And that's the Kugelpanzer done! This has been, without a doubt, one of the most rewarding projects that I've undertaken since I started the channel. I highly recommend this little kit from das Werk to anyone looking for a change of pace, a palette cleanser, or something that is inexpensive, original, and fun. As I said before, those of you on Patreon will soon see how I painted the red Kugelpanzer using Tamiya LP paints. Next week I'll be back with an entirely different video, however. In the meantime, if you want to know how to use Scotch-Brite as a stencil, click on the video on the left, and if you want to see how I built, painted and weathered a Star Wars TX-225 tank, check out the one on the right. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.